capacity development using internet and mobile technology. Through this medium, policy options and alternatives that drive democracy and development will be debated, tested, and promoted. Amplified online radio, anywhere, all the time.
We are your online talk and music radio station dedicated to providing alternatives that drive democracy and development. A world-class Pan-African online talk and music radio station where voices make a difference. Amplified Radio, promoting electoral democracy through programming.
It's educative. It's impactful. It's the Bounce Corruption Radio Show, coming to you live on AmplifiedRadio.net every Wednesday by 3 p.m. Join us as we speak to relevant stakeholders and policymakers on how citizens can drive the fight against corruption. The Bounce Corruption Radio Show is talk radio like you've never heard before. So join us every Wednesday at 3 p.m. Together, let's bounce corruption. The Bounce Corruption Radio Show is supported by Yaga Africa and the MacArthur Foundation.
A very good afternoon to you and welcome to the Bounce Corruption Radio Show on AmplifiedRadio.net, your Pan-African talk and music online radio station where your voice makes a different. My name is Ukachi, Chukwu, and I want to sincerely apologize that we're starting the program a little behind schedule, but not to worry, our guest today is going to stay with us all through the end of it, I'm sure, even if I have to chain him to the chair. Bounce Corruption Radio program, as you know, is dedicated to promoting conversations that drive accountability and social justice. It is brought to you courtesy of Yaga Africa with support from the MacArthur Foundation, and here on the Bounce Corruption Radio Show, we basically aim to educate citizens on issues of corruption and empower them to become anti-corruption crusaders. It also aims to build a movement of informed citizens, particularly young people engaged in reshaping social norms and leading social change and transformation in the society. So our discussions on this show focuses primarily on unveiling or exposing corruption, framing corruption as a socio-economic and political problem, requiring widespread support, and of course empowering citizens with the information and tools necessary to fight corruption and impunity. So with that introduction done, we will take a very short break, and when we return, we will introduce the topic and of course our guests. Stay with us.
It's educative. It's impactful. It's the Bounce Corruption Radio Show, coming to you live on AmplifiedRadio.net every Wednesday by 3 p.m. Join us as we speak to relevant stakeholders and policymakers on how citizens can drive the fight against corruption. The Bounce Corruption Radio Show is talk radio like you've never heard before. So join us every Wednesday at 3 p.m. Together, let's bounce corruption. The Bounce Corruption Radio Show is supported by Yaga Africa and the MacArthur Foundation.
We are your online talk and music radio station dedicated to providing alternatives that drive democracy and development. A world-class Pan-African online talk and music radio station where voices make a difference. Amplified Radio, promoting electoral democracy through programming.
Thank you for staying with us, and if you're just joining us, you are listening to the Bounce Corruption Radio Show on AmplifiedRadio.net, your number one Pan-African talk and music online radio station where your voice makes a difference. I am your host, Ukachi Chukwu. Now, back to the business of the day. Researchers revealed that corruption and poor governance are two major factors holding back Nigeria's socio-economic development. Little wonder successive governments, and the Buhari administration in particular, have made the fight against corruption a key part of their governance agenda. It is clear that one of the missing pieces in the anti-corruption agenda has been sustained and active citizen-led involvement in the fight against corruption. That is why we often hear things like the President Buhari's fight against corruption or the EFCC's anti-corruption agenda. There's always that them versus us narrative in there. And so today on the show, we will be looking at how to mobilize citizen mass action in the fight against corruption. And we have the right guests to do justice to the discussion. So sit back, relax, and get ready to be a part of the conversation. Remember, you can share your thoughts with us via all our social media handles. Twitter is at AmplifiedR. Facebook, where we are streaming live right now, is facebook.com/AmplifiedR. And you can use the Bounce Corruption hashtag hashtag. You can also leave your questions and comments for us via WhatsApp on 081-890-1558. The WhatsApp number again is 081-890-1558. So just one little short break again, and then we'll be ready to introduce our guest. If you're watching via WhatsApp, by Facebook Live, I'm sure you'd have already seen him, but I haven't done the proper introductions yet. So we'll continue the show after this brief timeout.
It's educative. It's impactful. It's the Bounce Corruption Radio Show, coming to you live on amplifiedradio.net every Wednesday by 3 p.m. Join us as we speak to relevant stakeholders and policymakers on how citizens can drive the fight against corruption. The Bounce Corruption Radio Show is talk radio like you've never heard before. So join us every Wednesday at 3 p.m. Together, let's bounce corruption. The Bounce Corruption Radio Show is supported by Yaga Africa and the MacArthur Foundation.
Welcome back to the program. My name is Ukachi, Chukwu, and you're listening to the Bounce Corruption Radio Show on AmplifiedRadio.net, your Pan-African talk and music online radio station where your voice makes a difference. Before the break, I told you that we'll be discussing how to eradicate corruption through citizen mobilization and engagement. And our guest today is Jude Feranmi. I hope I pronounced that right.
Yeah.
Okay. Jude is popularly known as JFK, so he's going to tell us what the K in his name means. Jude is the executive director of To Build a Nation, a non-partisan citizens movement focused on promoting the structural, political, and electoral reforms necessary for fostering a united, peaceful, and prosperous Nigeria. Jude, you're welcome to the program.
Thank you very much.
So, what does the K in your name mean?
It means Kolawole.
Ah, okay. So, Jude Feranmi Kolawole.
Yes.
That's right. All right. Thank you for telling me that. I've been meaning to ask you before now, and I never have. So, I first got to know you as the national youth leader of the Kowa Party,
yes,
the position you've left now, and now you serve as the executive director of To Build a Nation. Can you tell me a little bit more about this role, your organization, and why it's necessary to build a new Nigeria that works for all of us?
Okay. So, from the backdrop of my service as national youth leader for Kowa Party, one of the things that was important was that citizens needed. I thought and I agreed with Professor Kingsley Moghalu, who is the convener of To Build a Nation, that citizens need to take a responsibility for the development of our nation. And that conversation was not really, in my engagement as national youth leader of Kowa Party, it was something that I noticed, that Nigerians have a sit-back mentality when it comes to governance or democracy or let us make our country better. To be honest, the conversation for the average Nigerian is more like go and make our country better. And that needed to be solved. We have to solve that before we can move forward as a nation. There's this popular quote that basically simplifies my approach to the work I do now at To Build a Nation. It's by Barack Obama. And that was one of his campaign speeches where he said that the cherished rights of our liberty and freedom depend absolutely on an engaged electorate, an active electorate. We don't have that in Nigeria yet. Not on elections, it's obvious that the last election was like 30 million people who voted out of 84 million possible registered voters. And after the elections, those 30 million people who even think, yes, I have a civic duty to vote, then sit back and then expect the less than 10,000 people who were elected to basically just make our country better. Democracies don't work like that. And that aspect of citizen engagement, of saying there's a responsibility, there's a duty for a citizen of any democracy anywhere in the world. I think that informs what we're trying to do at To Build a Nation.
Brilliant. That makes you the perfect person to be sitting on this chair today.
I think so.
The program is Bounce Corruption Radio Show, and in my introduction I talked about what we do here, which is to foster conversations around equipping the citizens who are the core of what you do To Build a Nation. And Nigeria is unarguably, it can be argued that Nigeria is one of the most corrupt nations in the world. The stats are there to prove it. Nigeria is ranked, very highly on the Transparency International's Corruption Index ranking. So consequently, the fight against corruption has become a daily mantra. It's something that everybody says, Buhari says, it is almost cliche. But I want to ask, I mean, as someone who is actively engaged in nation building, and you've studied it, you know about it, you've engaged both from the political party point of view and now from a movement and organizational point of view, is fighting corruption Nigeria's albatross, such that if we solve corruption problem now, all our problems are solved? Is that it?
I honestly don't think so. Like, I have a book that I wrote. It's titled The Pragmatics of Real Change. And in that book, I identified what I call a cycle of woes. Now, if you take Nigeria from a distance, like, let's imagine that 1 minute you just become a Canadian citizen and you are looking at Nigeria from that perspective, right? You would be able to say that, I think this is Nigeria's core problem. If Nigeria solves this, then everything is going to basically fall into place. Like the judicial system, justice, for example, right? And then by the time you're reaching that conclusion, you move to another point entirely and say, corruption is a big problem. If Nigeria solves the corruption problem, everything will be fine in Nigeria, right? And then you go and say, okay, how do you solve corruption? How do you try and find it? You're like, oh my God, the problem is leadership. And that leadership is Nigeria's problem. If Nigeria solves the leadership problem, then everything will fall into place. And then you go all the way to, okay, now how do you solve the leadership problem that we know this is like the albatross? Right? And then you go and say, well, the leaders come from the followers. So we have a followership problem that we have to solve. It's okay, maybe if Nigeria solve the followership problem, and then you find yourself in a cycle, going up and up and up until you realize that it's a cycle of, this is what I titled the chapter actually. It's a cycle of woes that you find yourself trapped in, looking at the Nigerian situation. So I wouldn't say solving corruption is an albatross, is a problem that once you solve, right, then every problem in Nigeria will disappear. I don't believe that. I think that's a simplistic way of looking at the problems of any society, right? Corruption as a problem is not a Nigerian problem. There's not a Nigerianness about corruption, right? And I'll give you an example. The European Union, right, has a problem right now that they call VAT fraud. In fact, it's called carousel fraud. They lose more than €500 million every year to this fraud. That's corruption. Right, and people, European citizens, right, actually participate in ensuring that, okay, if I ship and this is not just taking all your money to a tax haven, this is literally fraud that the European Union is now trying to solve using blockchain technology. And I'm sure we'll get to the point of solving the corruption problems or the approaches to it. But corruption in itself, there's no Nigerianness about corruption as an issue itself. So I don't believe that corruption is one issue that you have to solve. Of course, if we solve corruption, right, we'll be able to achieve a lot of progress in our country. So, for example, if the budget says that an estimate of 100 million naira will be spent on schools or primary healthcare centers, and then by the time you get to the last mile in court, right, you still have $100 million naira that's supposed to be used to improve the primary healthcare centers in Nigeria. Then Nigeria would improve, like it's going to be like a catalyst to developing our country, right? But what we now want to see is how do we solve that corruption problem? Because you now realize that, going back to my analogy of the cycle of woes, you now realize that for you to solve the corruption problem, you have to solve other problems. Other genuine big problems. In fact, in public policy context, they're called wicked problems, right? You start with the problem and say, this is the problem we want to solve, right? Then you go and craft a solution. And then by the time you're back to say, yeah, we have the solution to this problem, the problem has already changed, right? So, in that sense, that's the way I see the issue of solving corruption in Nigeria. It's a problem that we have to solve, absolutely, right? But is it do we have to see it in the context of let us put all our energies in solving corruption and everything will disappear? I think that approach is going to be too simplistic, that we end up saying the way to solve corruption is by arresting and jailing those who are perceived as corrupt. And
that creates its own kind of problems.
Its own problems entirely. Right?
Let's investigate for a minute what President Buhari has been doing for the past 4 years in his first administration, and in the first year of his second tenure. And he is very, very keen about fighting corruption. He thinks that is one key problem that we need to solve if we must move forward. If you remember, he famously said Nigeria has to kill corruption before corruption kills Nigeria. How would you assess how he's doing so far in that regard?
So the first, and this is just coming to me right now, when President Buhari got elected in 2015 and got sworn in, right? You remember that initial gra-gra, let's call it that, right? And he went to I think was in London for a conference, for international conference, and then he presented the paper and said, this is what our government thinks about solving corruption. I think that was also the same conference that David Cameron made that comment about that were fantastically corrupt. Now, when I saw that, everybody, it's signaling. It's saying, I care about this issue and I want to solve it. And all the very, very right points were out. So I wrote a paper, not an article, more or less. I said, these are the 10 reasons why President Buhari's anti-corruption war will fail again. And I'm sure you remember, maybe not remember, but we were told, or at least I was told, that 1984, 1985, there was also the same war. And
he called it war against
indiscipline, right, during that time. And immediately after the then General Muhammadu Buhari left government, what you found was a General Babangida who was the institutionalized the concept of corruption in Nigeria. Right? Now, that my approach then was, yes, you might have good intentions about fighting corruption in any country, right? But there are ways to go about it, right? You cannot, for example, in my own view, from what President Buhari and his administration has done for the last 4+ years now, there is no systemic fight against corruption. There is no.
He's been accused of being selective in the fight. Is that an offshoot of that?
Honestly, Nigeria's political space is too divided or too complicated to even take that up as an issue, right? Because we can say yes, he's been selective about that, but in any country where, like Nigeria, where corruption is rife and you're trying to fight corruption, people will tell you have been selective. Right, irrespective of whether it is even PDP that's in opposition or Kowa Party or SDP, right? So that's not, it's an issue for some people on the political space, but that's not even an issue for me if we want to tackle the issue of corruption in itself, right? Corruption is systemic, and we need to understand that there is a system that drives the corrupt habits or the corrupt institutions in any country. Right, and if the foundations of that system is not tackled, is not brought down, if the foundations remain the same, it's like in Yoruba they say there's an adage that they say, and I'm seeing if I can try to remember it, that it basically translates to, if you cut a tree, right, on the branch, it would, like, no matter how long it takes, it just needs time for it to sprout up again. Why? Because the roots are still on the ground. So if you don't tackle the system of corruption and you go about tackling the symptoms, which is another thing I wrote in my book, saying corruption itself is a symptom of a rooted problem that we're not seeing, right? If you don't tackle that system, you don't tackle corruption at all. If the foundations of that system remains, then it's just a matter of time. And again, an example goes back to himself, to General Muhammadu Buhari, who was waging war against indiscipline, didn't set up the institutions and the orientation of the change in orientation that you need, right? To set up like a society where he says, okay, this is the law, these are the rules of the game, this is how you practice business, this is how you do government work, right? So he came in, war against indiscipline, and everybody was saying, yes, Nigeria is changing. And then he left because after a coup. And the same Nigerians that you were trying to say you have to be disciplined, right, went into a frenzy. Or that's I mean, if you are looking for the history of corruption in Nigeria and you draw a graph,
that was when he really spiked.
That was when he really spiked. After he left. And this is somebody who you could say that this guy is interested in fighting corruption.
following up on that, in a piece for the Brookings Institute, former Minister of Finance Ngozi Okonjo-Iweala said that to effectively fight corruption, I guess she had the same ideas as you, saying noting that corruption has to be the fight against corruption has to be systemic. She said we must first understand corruption and the several underlying forms. So do you think this lack of understanding is why even the much touted Buhari's fight against corruption has not been able to yield that strong rooted solutions or success that Nigerians are looking for?
So the way I view that is that yes, you might assume that we don't understand the corruption like Okonjo-Iweala has said here. That if before you solve a problem, you have to understand it, and then you have to try and propose and say, okay, if we solve it this way, then maybe this solution would work, right? But I don't think, at some point in my life, I used to think that the political elite in Nigeria do not have ideas, that they don't know. They don't know that you have to understand the problem before you solve it, right? And then, of course, in my public policy masters, I found out in fact, I think that's probably the only paper I remember from the masters in public policy that I did. It's written by these same guys that wrote Why Nations Fail, James Robinson and Darren Acemoglu, both of them professors, and the title of the paper is Theories of Bad Policy, right? One of the theories of bad policy is called the theory of stupidity. Now, the theory of stupidity says that you make bad policies because you don't know what good policies are, right? Because you have good intentions, but so you want to do something, and then you realize maybe you are not knowledgeable enough, you don't have the human capital or capacity, or the engineers or the policy professionals to give you good policy, so you make bad policy. And then they also go ahead to say Africa's problem is not, this theory of stupidity does not apply to Africa, because we know what to do, right? The political elite in Nigeria knows what to do. I think they do, right? Now, going back to understanding corruption as an issue, right? It is very difficult to ask even a 10-year-old Nigerian, right, that has studied the way that our society is built, to not be able to pinpoint the real problem and the underlying problem of corruption in our society, right? I was on a call before I came here, one of my mentors, and he was talking about the working class in Nigeria. I don't know if you have an idea of how much a director in a federal civil service earns in a year, right? Now, these are people who command billions and billions of naira in projects, right? They sit there for 35 years, right? And then you give them this remuneration package, right? And then expect them in that context to be faithful to executing this project and delivering on this project for the public, right? With that meager remuneration. So this guy walks in, is 30-something years old, right? He knows the Oga at the top. Now this is not the corruption at the high level, right? He knows the Oga at the top. He's more like, that kind of comment that old people make and say, my son is old, my son is as old as you are. So he's in front of this public servant, right, that has a son or a daughter or a cousin or whatever it is that is as old as this guy. And this guy comes in and says, well, of course, through the Oga's connection, he's taking a project that's worth billions of naira, right? But he has a problem, and he's willing to solve this problem with 100 million naira as a bribe to this public servant. Now, that's this typical scenario that happens over and over and over again in our country on a monthly basis. In fact, on a daily basis, in different MDAs. If you look at that situation, it's a real life situation, right? If you want to understand the context of corruption, you have to find out why is it that this guy, who is a public servant, who we expect to stay true to his oath of office or to his ethics of his profession as a public servant, would decide in that moment to not collect this 100 million naira bribe, that this 35-year-old guy, who is as old as the son, is offering him or her, when his pensions or our pension, this public servant pensions, is not even guaranteed. And even if it is guaranteed, it's not sure to be up to 100 million that he just has to do in one day. Now, if you want to solve corruption in any society, you have to look at that. So goes back to, now let's take this scenario as a case study. If you want to solve this corruption system, if you want to solve corruption in this scenario that we've just painted out, you have to look at solving number one, remuneration for public servants. Number two, pensions for public servants. If I, as a public servant, or if anybody, as a public servant, sees pensioners dying on the road, on the streets, queuing up for their own pensions, money they worked for, right? And they cannot get remuneration on that. They cannot get this pension, and they have to, some people die on the queues, some people die of diabetes because they're old, they can't afford drugs, right? And this public servant sees all that. He knows that when he retires, he would expect to go through the same system to get his pensions, right? He knows that the remuneration I'm getting, calculated in the end, this is how much pension I'll be getting at the end of the day, right? You make it difficult for that kind of person to say, except I've been told that I'm going to die tomorrow, and this act of corruption I'm about to decide on is what will decide whether I get to go to heaven or hell. You know how people can be religious, right? I think that's the only part that you can say, okay, this public servant is not going to take that bribe, because the odds are not balanced.
Very interesting. So from what you're saying, one of the conditions that facilitate corruption in Nigeria specifically, particularly public sector corruption, is often because the institutions that public servants work in do not match the work that they do with what is due them in comparison to what the public officers earn, of course. What other factors do you think facilitate corruption? If we take that out, particularly, I know we are looking at public sector corruption, but also the private ones, the ones that individuals. What are some of the other conditions you think?
So it's going to be very. If I give you a list, I cannot be exhaustive, right? So I would stay with a fundamental, right, which applies to everything. I was saying very recently that I want to write an article, and I've been getting a lot of energy to put together into writing that, and it's titled "The Faulty Foundations of Our Economic Structure." Right? If you have an economic structure that incentivizes not just corruption but quick wealth, right? That incentivizes a society where all you have to do to break through, as in a way, right, is to steal a lot of money, or to get a lot of money, or to get a break. And people cannot, the working class cannot afford the basics. If that foundation of the economic structure is like the current economic structure that we have, I believe foundations are faulty. We incentivize corruption as a society. Look at this scenario that we painted for the public sector. You go to the private sector, it's the same thing. Now, there's a quote that I like to, also going back to Barack Obama, there's a quote that I like to tweak. That Barack Obama said when he came to Africa when he was president. I said, Africa needs strong men. Africa no longer needs strong men. Africa needs strong institutions. And I'm like, Africa has strong institutions. Corruption is a strong institution in Africa. It is an institution. I know what an institution is. These are the rules of the game. Right? You get in the private sector, right, and you want to make money, right? These are the rules of the game. This is how our society runs. That's what an institution is, right? You take United States of America, for example, right? There is abuse of power, or perceived abuse of power, by President Trump, right? And once that's established, you set up an impeachment inquiry. It is the rule of the game, right? Quid pro quo is not allowed. It's the rule of the game. This is not allowed. This is allowed. That's the rule of the game. And it's the thing about institutions is that they grow stronger and they are reinforced over time, right? So in trying to answer your question specifically, right, the foundations of our economic structure, of our daily economic life as an individual citizen, right, is faulty. And we have to go back to those foundations, right, to be able to fix the issue of corruption and the issue of development for our country. And I'll give you another very, very micro example, right? You see a young guy who just graduated, right? He's a smart guy. Maybe I should use a lady now. He's smart lady that just graduated, right, from the university. NYSC done, and she gets a job. So she's not even looking for a job. So we're not even talking about the job market. There's a corruption about her of the job market itself, but she gets a job, right? And then this lady wants to resume and set up as an average Nigerian living in our country, living life. Doesn't even care about the government, right? Or, I mean, is okay with whatever leadership is happening in the country, right? And now needs to settle down. She has to pay rent. She goes to a landlord. No, we're not talking about government here. She goes to a landlord or goes to an agent and says, I want this house, a very good looking house that makes, comfortable. Maybe somewhere maybe not even in my Tama or Asokoro, but somewhere reasonable in the city, right? That is very close to work, that can allow this lady, to live the best of her life, right? Then she's asked to pay 900,000 naira or 1.2 million naira. Fair price. Maybe she earns 250k a month, right? But now she has to go and find 1.2 million naira at once. Nigeria is the only country, maybe not the only country in Africa, right? But she doesn't get a salary annually. The employer will not say, I'm giving you your salary once. Now you can go and decide what to do with it, right? Now she has to do one of two things to get that 1.2 million. For her to live a normal life, an average life, a comfortable life that allows her to live the best of her life in that career, right? So she has to find this money one way or the other. Now, that's an economic issue. She cannot. There's no way that if she doesn't have rich uncles, there's no way that she can come up with that, even though she earns a reasonable salary. Translate this scenario, right, into a scenario for a guy who has friends that are into cybercrime, who has friends that knows a politician that can get them a government contract, right, only if they pay some people.
So the circle continues.
So it's a foundational issue of Karl Marx, brilliant economist. I don't agree about this communism part, but brilliant economist says those who control the economic life of a nation control the political life of that nation, right? The daily economical life of a citizen, wherever you live, right, is the foundation of that society, right? You can basically build up an entire mansion of issues based on the life of an average Nigerian. So if this lady says, okay, well, I'm a Christian, I sing in church, I'm not going to do any kind of corruption, what about the guy who has friends who are into cybercrime and get money on a daily? $25 here. I have younger brothers, maybe not, of course, not blood brothers, but people who I grew up with. They're younger brothers back home in my local government, in Osun State, whose the height of the money they've gotten from cybercrime is $50. $50. And they do it. Why? Because in the when you draw out the scenario of their own daily economic life, right, you find out that there is no incentive. The foundation does not lay out a plan for you to say if you work hard, right, then you can earn legit money and then you can be comfortable. I'll give you another scenario. Immediately the first Uber guy that took me from the airport into the city of Abuja when I came back from into the country, right, was I can't forget that conversation. He asked me and said, every time that he goes to the airport to drop a family and is going on vacation, right, that his heart bleeds. And he asked himself, on which day would I be able to afford this kind of thing for my own family? This is not government contract. This is not we're interfacing with a public servant. This is a daily economic issue, right? In Europe, everybody goes for vacation. Of course, I'm sure you know that, right? It is not a luxury. It isn't, right? Everybody has a basic life you can sustain yourself. The people who are privileged, people who live in luxury, are seen to be privileged. You get, for you in Nigeria, the basic economic life of an average Nigerian, right, is luxury. The basic life for you to thrive as a citizen, that's a luxury.
That's a privilege.
It's a privilege.
I'm going to hold you there because we'll take a quick break, and then when we'll come back, we'll continue with the program. Remember that you can leave your questions and comments. We already have one or two comments coming in via WhatsApp. It's 0818-901-558. The number again is 0818-901-558. We still have Jude Feranmi, the Executive Director of To Build a Nation, here in the studio with us. So you will take some of these comments when we come back. So you get ready, Jude.
No problem.
The Amplified Online Radio is designed to provide a friendly, interactive, and licenseless platform for education, advocacy, inspiration, and capacity development using internet and mobile technology. Through this medium, policy options and alternatives that drive democracy and development will be debated, tested, and promoted. Amplified Online Radio, anywhere, all the time.
We are your online talk and music radio station dedicated to providing alternatives that drive democracy and development. A world-class Pan-African online talk and music radio station where voices make a difference. Amplified Radio, promoting electoral democracy through programming.
It's educative, it's impactful, it's the Bounce Corruption Radio Show, coming to you live on AmplifiedRadio.net every Wednesday by 3 p.m. Join us as we speak to relevant stakeholders and policymakers on how citizens can drive the fight against corruption. The Bounce Corruption Radio Show is talk radio like you've never heard before. So join us every Wednesday at 3 p.m. Together, let's bounce corruption. The Bounce Corruption Radio Show is supported by Yaga Africa and the MacArthur Foundation.
We are your online talk and music radio station dedicated to providing alternatives that drive democracy and development. A world-class Pan-African online talk and music radio station where voices make a difference. Amplified Radio, promoting electoral democracy through programming.
Sex, problem kid. You the pop but when you did club, but your rent they had you to pay up. You the old money since.
The Amplified Online Radio is designed to provide a friendly, interactive, and licenseless platform for education, advocacy, inspiration, and capacity development using internet and mobile technology. Through this medium, policy options and alternatives that drive democracy and development will be debated, tested, and promoted. Amplified Online Radio, anywhere, all the time.
So you're welcome back to the show. It's the Bounce Corruption Radio Show on AmplifiedRadio.net, your Pan-African talk and music online radio station where your voice makes a difference. And we still have Jude Feranmi, the Executive Director of To Build a Nation, who is discussing how to eradicate corruption through citizen mobilization and engagement. Remember that you can be a part of the conversation simply by tweeting at AmplifiedR using the Bounce Corruption hashtag, or you can drop your comments on the live Facebook feed that is on right now. You can also leave your comments and questions for us via WhatsApp on 0818-901-558. The WhatsApp number again is 0818-901-558. I already have a couple of questions and comments. Now this one is from says, hi UK, thanks for the great job. The program is very educative. My question to Jude is, which approach do you think will be more effective in eradicating corruption in Nigeria? A top-bottom approach where the leaders, through their actions and lead by example, formulate and implement policies that will make corruption unattractive, or a bottom-top approach where engaged citizens lead the way? Maria Igwe from Lagos State. Interesting question.
Yeah, interesting question actually. The first thing I noticed there, maybe you can read that to me again, but before you do that, the first thing I noticed is we have to have an hybrid of solutions. And when you say the top-bottom approach of solving corruption, is the leaders making good policies and then helping to develop the country, you realize that that's the two options: top-bottom approach, leaders do this, and then or bottom-up approach. But if leaders are going to make policy, right, the best way to make policy is a bottom-up approach to making policy.
Interesting.
I was just saying that on Twitter before I came here, right? Every time, in fact, there are different approaches to making policies in a society, right? Most times, you have to make the best policies that drive society forward are evidence-based policies, right? And the approaches are usually either bottom-up approaches or top-bottom approaches. Now, if you want to make a policy for the civil service, within the civil service that does not concern the citizen, then you can make a top-bottom. You can take a top-bottom approach to making that kind of policy because you have an idea of everything that happens within that system, right? But you're going to make a policy for the Nigerian people, right? It has to be a bottom-up approach to making that policy. To understanding, for example, which goes back to the point of understanding the problem of corruption, right? Say what exactly are the problems to making these kind of policies that we need to develop our people, right? So it's not so much of which approach is better to solving corruption, because in the end, if you go with the top-bottom approach of getting the leaders to do something, the leaders have to come back to the people and say, what are we supposed to do, right? So, and let me just say something I was hoping I would say later. Everywhere I go these days, right, to talk to Nigerians or to engage anywhere, the first thing that my mind is always telling me to communicate to the people is the citizens have a duty. In a democracy, right, the only people that have duties are not the people that the Constitution says we have to elect, right? There is a list of duties for a citizen. If you're a citizen in a democracy, you have some obligations that you have to take, and which again goes back to a few ideas I shared in my book, right? If one, like we've always said, and Madam Hobby Agel is equally popularized, if the office of the citizen is the highest office in the land, right, and the citizen who has the highest office in the land is not doing or carrying out his or her own duties, right, then that is enough leadership example for the people that follow after the next highest office in the land, which are the elected officials, right? And you know what happens with leadership, it flows from the top. If the leader if I make a law now in my office and say you can't do this in the office, and then I start doing the same thing, the staff in my office say, okay, guy is doing that now, so we'll follow, right? So there's a role, there's an obligation, there's a duty that, or maybe a list of duties that the citizens have that we have to be able to popularize, that we have to get that idea into the minds of our people and say that these duties have to be carried out by the citizens, right? It's only until then that we then can say, in fact, one of the duties of the citizen is holding government accountable. It's like you have an office and you're the boss and you say, hey, do that, and then you go to sleep, you go home, and then you don't come back in 3 weeks, and then you realize that the instruction that you gave has not been followed, and then you just leave it.
Let me come in here, because oftentimes, I don't know if it's because of some faultiness in the way that we do civic engagement or probably inadequate civic education, but it seems that citizens do not understand the roles that they play. Sometimes they do, and oftentimes it seems to end in getting your PVC and voting and canvassing for your candidate and saying one or two things on social media. Now that you have this platform, and as someone who engages with young people and citizens on nearly daily basis as a result of the work you do, why is it very important for citizens to be actively involved in the fight against corruption?
So we've come all the way from the beginning to say that corruption is a major problem that we have to solve. Maybe not an albatross, but a major problem that we have to solve in our society. Then we've moved to saying that the way to solve corruption, right, is by focusing on the fundamentals, the foundation of our economic structure as a nation, right? And now we're talking about the fact that citizens have to take a duty, have to understand that there is a duty to solving corruption. So, if to answer your question, I basically take you back to the first two things that we mentioned, which is citizens have a role, a serious role, to ensure that these foundations of our economic structure that incentivizes corruption changes. So, and again, I've had a lot of ideas, and say at the time in Nigeria, which I realized very funny enough, that landlords they have to take a 2-year rent, and now there was a campaign that said now they take 1 year. Citizens have to come together and say, see, if you really want boys and guys and young people, which make up like almost half of our population, right, to release this pressure on making money overnight, you have to solve those economic problems and raise a campaign that says housing or landlords should not start collecting money on a monthly basis. Or if landlords don't want to pay money on a monthly basis, let employers start paying money on an annual basis, salaries on an annual basis, so that there is no pressure on the young guy to go looking for money where money doesn't exist. So before that would happen, before the foundations of our society would shift, the citizens have a responsibility there. You get? Now I can tell you about a lot of things that we can. I mean, I can be politically correct, right? To give you tidbits and sound bites and a list like we do in class in Europe, right? And say number one, citizens have to be willing to protest. Number two, citizens have to be willing. These are another popular one. Citizens have to be able to change their orientation. And so, what's the National Orientation Agency doing to change the orientation of Nigerians towards corruption? A simple example. I'm sure you know Choma Chukwu. She was on a panel I was moderating for Westminster Foundation for Democracy, right? And I asked her a question. I'm not sure I can remember the question. I was talking about the role of young people, right? And she made a very, very beautiful comment, right? That if the head of a fish is rotten, then there's no hope for the fish, right? Now, you take that context into in making that explanation that she gave. She said, what is the hope for a woman who lives by the riverside in Bayelsa State, suffering from the effects
of oil spill,
who used to fish, right, as our own, going back to that foundation again, economic daily life living, right? But now, because of oil spills, she either has dead fishes that she catches or fishes that she cannot hit because it causes her burns and her children's burns. So she cannot hit. So our economic life is in tatters. And then you come during the elections and offer him 5,000 naira that she's already skilled at saving and managing for the next 3 months. You will be shocked. Now, what is the hope for that person or for you who wants to change your orientation?
Hard fight.
It is an almost impossible fight. Do I feed my children with this money that this politician is promising me? Right. Or do I stay down to the training that the National Orientation Agency has come to our town to come and give us on corruption? Right. You go back to that foundation of the economic structure. And now, I was explaining something to a few friends who came over to my office 2 days ago about this economic structure that I'm talking about. And I'm saying the role that citizens have when it comes to citizens' engagement and solving corruption, the role that we have is to go back and say this foundation has to change.
Primarily because we bear the brunt.
We bear the brunt, right? We can take corruption as an issue and we want to face it, right? But my approach and my advice and my recommendation would be to say, go back to the roots, go back to the economic structure of the nation, right? If this economic structure incentivizes corruption, right, you can cut out the branch. You just have to wait a time. It will come out even more powerful, more fresh. So the role that citizens have is to go back to that economic structure and say these are the symptoms of the economic structure. Housing, for example, that's an issue. If you put pressure on a young guy who's just graduating to get a house and a car, and he can't get that money anywhere, there's a problem, right? One person might be able to say, I don't want to be corrupt. Two persons might be able to say that. But in a nation of 17 million people, and you know what they say with yeast and bread, right? Remind me.
I'm not familiar.
A small amount of yeast
Causes it to
levels the
rise.
bread.
Oh, okay.
So even if you have 10 kg of bread that is saying, I'm not going to be corrupt, I'm not going to be corrupt,
Just
I'm not
a
going to be
little
corrupt,
drop.
you put that yeast and then they say Nigeria is a fantastically corrupt country.
That brings me to my next question, Jude. Our generation, I don't know if you're a 90s kid or a late 80s
90s
kid.
actually.
So our generation, we have been unfortunate. We haven't witnessed a Nigeria that has worked.
Absolutely.
We haven't witnessed good governance. I used to hear my dad, my mom talk about the times that they went to school and how good the schools were. All of my siblings went to private schools. We went to public universities and we knew what it was like. And so that has, you cannot argue it. It has developed this deep-rooted political apathy. You have young people who say it doesn't matter, there's no point. Why do I have to come out? Why do I have to mobilize? Why do I have to take a step to change this faulty economic structure that you're talking about when our votes don't count? People have given up. People are leaving this country in droves. Someone sent me a message just when I posted something about the challenges that we're facing with there's a current protest by KK riders in Guarimpa. So I live in Guarimpa. I had to walk to work. I walked home yesterday. I was drenched by the rain. It was not funny. So I put up a post about it on Facebook, and somebody came to my mention, and this guy is one of the most ardent supporters of a Nigeria that works, and he told me, listen, if you have an opportunity to leave this country, leave.
I'm sure that broke your heart.
That was what he told me, and I was like, wow. So how do we deal with this political apathy and the attendant docility that it that prevents people from mobilizing to fight corruption? How do we deal with it?
So between both of us and all the listeners, right, it is a generational problem, right? It is a hard problem. And like you, I have a friend. If I tell the story of this my friend, you'll be like, please let that guy not come back to Nigeria, right? And he just left like last week. I put on Twitter too. He left for South Africa. Right? People are not just leaving to Europe; they are going to Ghana. People are leaving to. Somebody said my abroad now. Anyhow is Ivory Coast. So if you're traveling abroad, I mean neighboring African countries, right? The point I make in this kind of situation is to say, repeat, I've not been successful. So maybe you invite me sometime again, and I'll probably have a different argument, right? But the argument I have right now is to say that if you're a young person, right, and you see this country as it is right now, and you want to go to another country that already works, right? One of two things is sure. That country that works because people are making it work. It's something my father says over and over again when I was growing up until I even grew up. Right? If something is working, somebody is making it work. Right? So if you're going to a country that's working already, right, the people there are the ones making it work. Right? Secondly, now you carry your resources, your skills, your ideas in the peak of the
prime of your life.
Prime of your life, right? You carry all those resources to another country to live. But you're not just going to live. You are going there to build another person's country that's already working. Now, if you see all of that, I'm sure that does not appeal to any self-interest of average young Nigerians of our age, right? It appeals to patriotism, and like I said, that's not been very, very effective, right? But we need, as a generation, to get to a point where we realize that if our country is ever going to work, right, we are going to be the ones to make it work. You said something that I promised myself I'm going to try and debunk every time I have the opportunity. That those good old days, right? The question is, were there ever good old days in Nigeria?
Well, have we ever had it this bad before?
Of course it's worse, right? But when people say good old days, after I opened this book, I didn't think you were going to ask me this question. I was just reading this book by Obafemi Awolowo. He wrote this book in prison in 1966. Now, it was making an argument here that they were talking about Unitarianism and federalism, and the fact that Nigeria needs a unitary constitution under the military, and that's the only way that Nigeria is going. The same way we are saying that restructure now, and everything would, like at Albatross. The same argument was happening in 1966 after the coup, right? Awolowo was in prison. He wrote this book to say, these are my ideas. He said, there are 33 items and 12 sub-items of particular interest that the Unitarians are making, that the federal constitution that we have in Nigeria has made a situation like this. So the federal constitution of Nigeria then is responsible for distance, 23 items. I'll just list some parts of that. Number 16. Unduly fat salaries and allowances for ministers, parliamentary secretaries, and legislators.
1866.
Number 23. Wrong and short-sighted approach to our economic problems. Number 29. Using government measures and machinery to benefit private business or business owned by ministers. Number 12. Rigging of the 1964 general election. Number 22. Mishandling of labor issues leading to the 1964 countrywide general strike. You just talked about a strike now by Keke guys, right? Number 5. Unduly large expenses of running a multitude of governments. Number 6. Heavy concentration of power in the regions, which thereby constitute a real threat to the unity of the federation. This was 1966. I don't know how old your father is, whether he was born in 1960s, but these good old days that they're talking about, right? Number 33. Tribalism in the distribution of amenities and resources of the federal government, right? Number 28, showing favors to businessmen and industrialists in return for rewards in cash or in kind. So this corruption problem we talk, not be today, my brother, my sister.
That's an interesting question that someone sent in to us, and I think that is fitting to bring it up right now. And she says, this is actually Ekene listening all the way from London. Ekene says, interesting conversation. So my question is, are developing nations like Nigeria just predisposed to corruption? Because it seems like no matter what we do, corruption remains with us. And I say this because of, I haven't read this book yet, Thoughts on the Nigerian Constitution by Bafemi Awolowo. I haven't read it before. Now, it's interesting that the issues he raised in 1966 are still the same issues that we're talking about in 2019. Absolutely. Does that mean we're just predisposed to corruption? Like, that's the way we are?
You know, it goes back for me to systems. And I'll make I'll share this with you. When one of the first programs I had was Raising New Voices Initiative, which I'm also convener of. We do a fellowship in Nigeria. And what we want to do here is, the goal is to identify one person who is a young leader in all the local governments in Nigeria. We want to be able to say at one point that, at least in this country, we have one person who understands the vision, who is a good person, and who is a leader in every local government in Nigeria. So we do a fellowship. We bring one person from each local government, we bring them together, we train them. We've been running this for the last 1 year now. So since we started, because I was out the country, I've not been able to talk to them. And here, my first engagement with them. One of the things I said, Nigeria does not have, when you put Nigeria in the context of countries, and I'm saying this because of the question you asked, right? When you put Nigeria in the context of all the other countries in the world, right, Nigeria does not have a unique problem. The only issue we have is that these problems that were solved in 1966, is still the problems that your parents complained about, right? Is the problems that we are complaining about, right? And my charge to them then was to ensure that whatever you do, just make sure that in the future, we'll still have look at this Europe VAT fraud I talked to you about, right? They have problems. Any society that does not have problem, right, is probably as transformed into Eden, the Garden of Eden, right? Every society will always have an issue. Right, but our issue is that we are stagnated on this one series of problems that we've had over the century. And the reason I believe that is happening, or that has happened over the years, is because we've not really gotten that. Going back to that point, we've not really gotten to that point where we believe that the citizen has a duty in making Nigeria work. We elect people and we send them to make our country work. It can. There is a duty for the citizen. Right? And when we say, imagine how many issues we have in this country and how many population, what our population is, right? If we have 10% of Nigerian population as active citizens carrying out their duties, we can share the issues, right? We can say, okay, this foundation of our economic structure that is really, really a problem, right? Some people would focus on that, and we'll have a huge number of people, right, saying this has to change. Right? We can get another set of people and say, see, this issue of political reforms in the country, right, is the issue that we want to face, right? This issue of whatever issue it is, and then we will realize that we begin to solve those problems one after the other. Other problems will come around, right? And then we realize, okay, this is the new approach that we have to solve, right? And then in fact, my definition of development, right, is a country develops when a country moves from one problem to another problem.
Interesting way of putting it.
Yeah. Because there is no way that you ever get to a point where you don't have a problem in society. America has a Trump problem. And are they going to solve it? They are trying to solve it. Right? In solving it, you generate economic realities. Every newspaper or media channel in the United States of America right now that is a major channel has a Trump analyst. This guy, in fact, a Trump expert. Right? This guy is the expert on Trump in our organization. So if you need any analysis on Trump, he follows him, he knows what he says, he knows what he tweets. That is the job. Right? And multiply that by a number of media organizations in the United States of America. Right? That's the problem they're trying to solve. We are creating economic opportunities out of it. Right? So when a country moves from one problem to another problem, right? We realize that look at this VAT fraud I'm talking to you about. They are solving it with blockchain.
That's high tech.
That's high tech. And they know it's going to work. And after they finish up, human beings are like this thing they taught us in economics. Our needs are insatiable. Right? It's the same. So when you solve a problem, you're like, okay, something has to happen. In fact, societies create problems for them to solve so that they can move forward, so they can develop something. The problem with our country and why we've not developed, right, is that the problems that our fathers complained about is the problems that our uncles complained about, is the problems that we're complaining about, and God forbid, is the problems that our children will be complaining about. So we're stagnated, and we're not moving forward until we say that this is making democracy work for our country, right? We're going to stay with this problem and solve it, and create an institution out of that problem, right? And then move on to the next problem, right? We're not going to develop as a country. Unfortunately, let me just add this, right? For that to happen, right, there has to be a set of citizens saying this problem, we're going to tabernacle here until we solve it.
Coming back to active citizen mobilization and engagement. Now, this one says, I feel the fight against corruption cannot be effective when we have so many defective laws that hamper this fight. For instance, how can we have a constitution that grants immunity to sitting governors, making it difficult for them to be prosecuted? We all watched Governor Ganduje allegedly collecting bribes on camera, but there was nothing the EFCC could do because he had immunity. If we are serious about fighting corruption, then we have to amend these defective laws. This is from Abdullahi Mohammed from Madala. Quickly, do you agree with him that defective laws are part of our problems?
Absolutely.
Are you pro changing our constitution, or do you think our constitution works?
I am pro a new constitution. See, there are people who will tell you. Are we out of time already?
No, keep going.
Oh, okay. We can do this for like three hours. I don't mind. Right? There are people who will tell you, right, that our problem is which is why I'm reading this book, right? The military woke up one day and said we're going to return power to the civilians, right? And then if you have a copy of his constitution, buy any copy. Anybody you can even go online. It is written there, decree number 9. Our constitution is a decree, which is maybe there are other countries that their constitutions are decrees, but I've not seen. So the military woke up, called some people together, put up some papers together, and said this is your constitution, and they wrote that we, the people of Nigeria, agree to be ruled by this. So if you don't go back to that foundation, right? Again, so there's foundation of our economic structure, there's foundation of our political structure, right? If you don't go back to that constitution, then we are locked in a rat race. I really wish I could make that analogy here because it's a long expose. Maybe when I write the article, I'll share with you.
That would be great.
Right? We have a constitution that is designed. We're in a rat race. It is a designed maze that every Nigerian hears. And there are some people that have designed it. You watch Hunger Games.
Yes.
Basically, just like Hunger Games. The system always wins. So if you need it. I think I was in my final year when I really said, why do we have immunity for governors? So I went to do some research, right? The British colonial masters had immunity for their candidates, for their elected officials, right? But it was taken away in 1937 because their citizens came together and said, no, you cannot be above the law. You cannot say that citizens will be prosecuted when this happens, and this citizen will not be prosecuted when this happens. And they remove immunity.
No citizen is more citizen than the other.
No more citizen than the other. People came together to do that. Right? And that's why the Nigerian system copied from US after some point, but our original system or constitution was taken from the institutions of our society, and how we govern was taken from the British colonial masters because they colonized us, right? And then when went to combine into a presidential system by President Gowon, they picked up from the United States of America, right? So we have practices from the British, so we're like an hybrid, or we're like a confused system, right? And the Nigerian people, as not for the last 20 years, we rely on a constitution that is not given by Nigerian people. Nobody anywhere sat down to say that in this democracy, in this Fourth Republic, this is how we're going to be governed. Right? Sir Richards was one of the colonial governors in Nigeria at 1953 or 1954. He gave the Richardson Constitution. Right? It lasted for 3 years. Macpherson came, and a white man, right, saw that there's a problem with this constitution, and then called a conference, 1954 conference, 1955. Right? And then it's also written in this book. I'm not sure you can get this though, because I was looking for it for like 6 months when I was in the Netherlands, like very, very old book. Right? And then people came together from different parts, from the north, from the south, from the west. You will be amazed, right, that the northern part of the country was the only part of the country that favored the federal constitution. Yes. Under Macpherson. A centrally autonomous constitution that says, okay, the constitution of the region will have its own powers, the central will have its own powers, and it will be separate. The Eastern people said they want a situation whereby the central government is more powerful than the regions. Right? The Western government said they want a situation whereby the central government and the regional government are almost the same, but the central government runs concurrent. Right? And they agree, and at some point, Macpherson said, in general, we're going to have a federal constitution, right? Because everybody almost said, even though everybody didn't agree, but we thought it was a federal constitution. And he gave us the federal constitution in 1963. And then the coup happened, the military came, and because, the military is, whoever is the most senior military or down to the top, is a unitary mode, right? And then give Nigeria, and since then, we've been running with that. So, the law, see, there are some, you should talk to your Shogunro. Maybe if it's Nigeria, you should come on and just come and talk about these fundamental issues, right? The discretion, Nigerian president is one of the most powerful presidents in the world. I don't care whatever powers the United States president has.
That will bring me to my next question, right? So we are dealing with in a country where the presidency has all of this power. The executive is so powerful that the executive can wake up and say one thing and that would stand. And we're dealing also with shrinking civic space.
Yes.
We're also dealing with a Buhari administration that is increasingly clamping down on dissent. Just yesterday, some Nigerians who went to protest and asked for the release of Showore were allegedly shot by the DSS. So all of these issues makes engaging citizen fight against corruption very risky and dangerous. What are some of the practical tools you think citizens can adopt to fight corruption under the Buhari administration?
I think it's just one practical issue.
And that would
Numbers. How many people went to... I am also guilty because I unfortunately didn't even know the protest was going to happen yesterday. I wanted to go. And my sister was telling me that my grandfather was not sleeping in the grave. That's why I did not go. Right? But I wanted to go. Right? But if you have a situation where there are 10,000 people in front of DSS, how many are there? And look at us. Right? They've shot at them. They've injured a couple of people,
including a journalist,
including the Guardian Nigerian journalist. Right? Yemi Adamolekum, my former boss, they collected our phone, smashed it. Right, I'm even glad she's safe right now. Right, but how many people went there? If we need a strategy for citizen engagement in Nigeria, it is not. There's no two ways about it. Numbers, and I'm going to go back to one of the things I said when in this discussion, right, about the fact that the citizens of Nigeria we've not gotten to that point where we say that there is a duty. You have a duty as a citizen, like it's your primary duty in a democracy, right? And because we don't have a lot of people who think like that, we have very, very small portion of the country, right, who is talking about engaging government and holding government accountable and fighting corruption and talking about changing these fundamental issues, right? Now, because we have that small number of people doing this, there are lots of issues. So I'm somebody who cares about the foundations of the fundamental issues in Nigeria, right? Political reform, right? Electoral reform, constitutional reform. The constitution is like fundamental things. So if you tell me today that there's a protest or there's a march on electoral reform or constitutional reform or justice reforms in Nigeria, things that I consider that these, if we solve these things like they're fundamental issues, I will be there, right? But the guy who cares about Shawaria won't be there. The guy who cares about GBV, gender-based violence, won't be there. The guy who cares about any other issue, they won't be there. The people who are doing tracker, are they not doing a good job? They're doing a good job, but that person won't be there. So in the end, we're matching for constitutional reforms in Nigeria. I'm just 200. If I was a politician and I see 200 people marching, I'll go look for 200 people. I mean, this is a joke. So it goes back again to citizen engagement. The citizen has a duty, an obligation. And we need to drive this into, in fact, if there's anything, it's just that the National Orientation Agency will become antagonistic to the government it is serving if it begins to take that kind of message, right? But we need a machinery, the way my boss says, a positive propaganda machine that drives into the consciousness of Nigerian people that you have a duty as a citizen, right? Once we have numbers, a lot of numbers saying, yes, I'm prepared to carry out my duty as a citizen, right? We can then begin to see those numbers in different issues that we need. But how do we get to that point? I'm looking for an opportunity, right, to talk to just make maybe a 15-minute speech, right, to people working in the civic space, stakeholders, right? And it goes back to the title of Martin Luther King's speech in 1963 during the civil rights movement.
I have a dream.
Not I have a dream. He has different speeches. The title of this speech, and I think Nigerian even needs to hear more of it, is titled "Unity is the Need of the Hour."
That's very profound.
Very profound. Right. Nigeria today would continue to deteriorate, not just in civic spaces, right, but in the approach that the government takes to Nigerian citizens, right? If we do not unite, people working in the civic space, we have a population that does not understand these issues, and it will take a while, if we are going to be honest to ourselves, right, to drive into the consciousness of Nigerian citizens that you have a duty as citizens to carry out, because you're occupying the citizens in the land, and you cannot be lazy, you cannot be complacent. Right? It's going to take time for us to do that. So those of us who are in the civic space who understand this duty, right, have to begin to come together. We have to unite. And the reason why we have to unite is because if you continue to talk of corruption, right, and the people that care about gender-based violence, and the people that care about Shore, and the people that care about incompetence of the Nigerian government, and the people that care about electoral reforms and constitutional reforms don't join you, right, you will be alone for a long time, and your issues will not be solved. I will be alone for a long time. My issues will not be solved, right? The government will see that there are very, very small numbers here, right? People don't care about the issues that they say they care about, right? And then the numbers don't come, and then the politicians don't act, and then the government continues to repress on journalists and citizens and
pass repressive laws agency to track corruption with death penalty as one of the propositions. Hate speech.
Death by hanging.
Death by hanging. Very interesting. But very quickly, I have this question. I think that's one of the final questions that we'll take today. And it says, "Hello UK, very engaging conversation today. I love the insights your guest is bringing to the show today. My question to him is, if you were President Buhari, or you have the opportunity to advise him, what strategies would you propose on how to tackle corruption to a standstill?" Anthony from Area 1, Abuja.
All right. Without regards to the Buhari Media Center, so that they don't come and attack me that I'm advising the president, right? My approach is going to be simple. And again, a lot of people have said I'm a fundamentalist, and at times I argue that, but now I just want to embrace it, right? My advice to President Buhari or his cabinet, or the people who really want to intend to fight corruption, is to, first of all, you should go and read my article, 10 ways by which President Buhari's corruption fight is going to fail again. I itemized 12 ways of things that needs to be done, right? I'm not going to talk about those 12 things because that's a list, right? My core recommendation, right, would be for the government there's Professor Sese.
Sege.
How did I forget his name? Right. But there's a committee on corruption, right? And one of the things that they need to do, that I believe needs to be done as a government, right, is to set up and is to start with an holistic review of the incentives to corruption in Nigeria. Right. That's the first place to begin. You can set up an IPPIS system that ensures that people are able to people no longer take ghost workers. You can say you now have the judiciary in your pocket, and then anybody that is sent to the court, you'll be able to prosecute them and send them to jail. You can say even if you can't send them to jail, you arrest them and then you don't put them in prison, right? But the president will be repeating the mistake of 1985. Because he's going to leave, whether this total agenda happens or whether the 6-year tenure that they're proposing happens, whether that happens or not,
he won't be there forever.
He won't be there forever. So if he's genuinely interested in fighting corruption, right, and he wants to be able to, I mean, if I was President Buhari and I was in his shoes, I would like, he's an old man, right? So I would like to think that in the history of Nigeria, I want to be able to say, as if I was President Buhari, I want to be able to say that this is the guy that really cared about fighting corruption and fought corruption to a standstill and solved the problem of corruption when I die. That's what I want to leave as my legacy, right? So if that is existent, right, and you want to be able to do that kind of legacy, then you have to start saying, what's the holistic incentives to corruption in our country, right? And then, because those incentives, they're not campaign worthy kind of reforms. They're not. So maybe one more thing I would like to add as one of the things that need, like, when you tackling these holistic reforms on corruption and incentives corruption, right, is to say that, I know this is probably not related, you take us like 1 hour plus to explain how this is related to our conversation, right? But Nigeria does not have a data system.
So technology again is very key in the fight against corruption.
Technology innovation, right? And what is this thing that we are even saying is technology innovation, right? Somebody was saying on radio and saying that because I did not want the DSS to arrest me or somebody to arrest me, I went to my village. And I was in the Swedish embassy, and the guy was talking about investigative journalism. And after I did the investigation, they were looking for him. We went to his village,
and they couldn't find him.
They couldn't find him.
Okay, that's
if that continues in this country, you can't fight corruption. You can't. So if you need to be able to say that there are 100 and again you go to, which goes back to the wicked problem I was talking to you earlier at some point, right? Because for you to be able to do this basic thing I've talked about, right, there are people who are there who want to benefit corruptly from solving that problem, right? But you need to put all your resources into being able to say that there are 1,377.3 people, if there is something like 0.3%, right, that work for the government. These are their names. This is where they live. This is their identity. There are 170,777,233.1 persons in Nigeria, and one baby was just born now. Right? This is where they are. This is their identity. I'm sure you have a SSN number in the UK.
Yes,
when you were there.
Yes,
I have a BSN in the Netherlands. If the government wants to give me money, right, the government will come directly to me and give me money. If the government wants to tax me, the government will come directly to my account and tax me. Another, again, I said earlier that I'm a fundamentalist. Let's stick to the fundamentals. If the fundamentals are fine, right, then the rest will be fine. I was thinking this morning when I was going to work, and one policy that the federal government did that I really, really liked, I don't know how well they're implementing it, was telling private companies to build roads and then they remove it from their tax bill. Right? Now, I'll tell you the very big policy, beautiful policy. You see that policy and like, yeah, at least the government should think about more ideas like this, right, and implement it, right? Because you know what that does? That takes away the middleman, right? And it says we need money from Ukachi to build roads in Nigeria. But before we collect Ukachi's money, Ukachi will have to pay VAT to ShopRite. The taxman has to go to ShopRite to collect the money. The taxman has to remit that money to the government. the government has to send that money to the contractor. The contractor will now build roads. Right? What the federal government has done with this simple policy is to say that, you know what, ShopRite, don't worry about the taxman. Don't worry about the bidding for the government. Don't worry about the contractor. Build the roads. And then we'll collect the taxes. Because we won't collect tax, we'll give you a tax credit. What has the government done? It has cut out a lot of people that have access to that kind of money. So the taxpayer's money is making a direct benefit to the taxpayer. Right? Now think about that with the issues. I'm just talking about policies now. Think about that in terms of the priority of the government. That's why you know that Nigeria's government, and these are not Nigeria entirely, that's how you know that Nigerian government does not care about education or the future of Nigerian youth. Right? Because in fact, my advice to that guy that was asking me about my advice to President Buhari, go and implement this policy for the educational system. Tell ShopRite to build a school. Tell Dangote or Atedo Peter side, right, to build a school. How many schools do we have in Nigeria? Maybe 1,677 tertiary institutions. Tell them and say, okay, if you build these facilities, right, we'll do it from a tax credit. See how many schools grow up in the next 2 years. That's the government that cares about education. But let's leave that because that's another issue. That's the policy. That's on the surface. What's at the base? At the base is the fact that the government, through that policy, has been able to remove a lot of people from accessing the taxpayer directly. That's what an identification system does.
So if I understand what you're saying, your advice to, or one of the advice that you give the president if you were to speak to him directly on this issue, is to incorporate technology and a data system in the fight against corruption. We're running out of time, so my final question to you would be this: can we win this fight? Is there hope?
Of course, there's always hope. I mean, we're alive, so there's always hope. As far as there is life, there is hope, right? Now, will we win this fight against corruption, or will we win this fight for the development of our nation, right? Of course, we can win, and I mean, I always say that. Yes, we can. All right, we can win, but it will depend again on a few things, and I'll try and itemize them. One.
Can you sum this up in 2 minutes? Or
yeah, sure. Great. One, a situation where the Nigerian citizens understand that I am a citizen of the Federal Republic of Nigeria. That does not come as a freebie. It comes with responsibilities. It will take a while before we get there. Right? Now, before we get there, it depends, whether we can win or not, now depends on the current reality, which is the unity of the people within the civic space. To be able to say that this is, in startup lingo, it's called MVP, right? You find a geographical location, you go there, you put all your resources there, you can mobilize everything, and then you start from there. Where we need to start from in engaging on these issues, right, is bringing every citizen who already understands their duty as a citizen to come together and say, I know you care about education, right? But on this issue of corruption, right, let's come together. When it gets to the issue of education, I'll come with you. When it gets to the issue of constitutional reform, I'll come with you. That way, we have the numbers, right? By the time we bring all those numbers together and start to solve those issues one after the other in a timetable fashion, right? You realize that we end up in a situation where we're not solving the issues that our fathers solved or our uncles complained about.
Whew. That was I don't know what word to use, but that was great. I mean, when I was thinking of who to bring, I knew you had to be the person because we've talked about these issues behind the scenes. I remember the last time that we hung out. Yeah. I mean, we're talking about this. So thank you so much for bringing your wealth of experience and your knowledge to the Bounce Corruption Radio Show. We appreciate you a whole lot. A handshake, I think, would be very fitting at this point. Thank you so much, dear listeners, for your patience and for sticking it out with us today. We want to thank our guest, Jude Feranmi, who is the Executive Director of To Build a Nation. It's been such a pleasure having him on the show. And to all of you who listen, all of you who sent in your comments and your questions, thank you so much. We appreciate you. And don't forget to join us again this next week for another episode of the Bounce Corruption Radio Show, brought to you by Yaga Africa with support from the MacArthur Foundation. I want to sincerely appreciate the contributions of my producer, DJ Drex, who's doing a fantastic job behind the scene, as well as Cynthia, who is also doing a very good job on social media, ensuring that what we're discussing in the studio is out there for our listeners who follow us on Twitter and Facebook especially. And so as we go, remember that none of us is immune from the effects of corruption. And as Jude Feranmi has said, you have a civic duty, you have a responsibility to ensure that you fight corruption in your immediate space. Remember, together we can fight corruption. My name is Ukachi Chukwu. Please enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank you.
Jude, I didn't want this to end. My God.
The Amplified Online Radio is designed to provide a friendly, interactive, and licenseless platform for education, advocacy, inspiration, and capacity development using internet and mobile technology. Through this medium, policy options and alternatives that drive democracy and development will be debated, tested, and promoted. Amplified Online Radio, anywhere, all the time.
It's educative. It's impactful. It's the Bounce Corruption Radio Show, coming to you live on amplifiedradio.net every Wednesday by 3 p.m. Join us as we speak to relevant stakeholders and policymakers on how citizens can drive the fight against corruption. The Bounce Corruption Radio Show is talk radio like you've never heard before. So join us every Wednesday at 3 p.m. Together, let's bounce corruption. The Bounce Corruption Radio Show is supported by Yaga Africa and the MacArthur Foundation.